Welcome in. It is the Northside Baseball Podcast. He is Jason Ross. I'm Mitch Woodmeyer, talking anything and everything Chicago Cubs baseball, however you get your podcast. Maybe it's via our website at Northside Baseball, our YouTube channel at Northside Baseball, Apple Podcast, a variety of other ways. We always appreciate you taking time to tune into the podcast. Regular season winding down, postseason around the bend. Cubs can at least clinch a playoff berth. I believe as early. We are recording this Tuesday for a Wednesday publish per the usual. Believe there's a chance the Cubs could clinch a postseason spot tonight, if I read that correctly. They have Fangraphs says they have a 100% chance to make the playoff, but it is not quite 100%, but obviously very much so nearing that point. If you're watching via video instead of audio, you can see the rundown to the right. If not a bad thing. Always a little bit more of a surprise. Let's start with a player that I know we talked about a couple months ago. We set aside a specific segment for him. I don't remember if it was before the All-Star break, after the All-Star break. Doesn't really matter. It's Nico Hoerner and sort of the season he's having, the importance he is to this lineup. Obviously, we know, Jason, about his Gold Glove caliber defense, and I do think it's worth noting that, there's a shot that he could end up. There's only 12 games left, but with the batting title in the National League, which would certainly be pretty cool. I know batting averages, the importance of it has been widely diminished, in the last few years with new data kind of taking priority. But to have on your resume that you won a batting title is still pretty damn cool. And Nico Hoerner right now, again, we're recording on Tuesday before the game against Pittsburgh. Nico's batting .299. Trey Turner leads the National League at .305. Sounds doable. He could catch him, but again, it's worth noting there's only 12 games left, so it's more ground than what you would think with only a dozen games left in the regular season. And despite that, I know I said we've touched on Nico's season a couple of months ago. He's in the 100th percentile in strikeout percentage, 99th percentile in whiff percentage, 6th percentile in barrel percentage on the other side of that coin, 9th percentile in hard hit percentage. Like, he is the ultimate throwback. And quite honestly, I love having a guy like that in the lineup. I don't know if this is not to discredit Nico Hoerner, but I don't know in today's game if you want, 4 or 5 Nico Hoerners, like guys cut from that cloth in your lineup, but to have one, maybe 2, I think it's absolutely perfect to have a throwback like that. He doesn't hit for power, but the dude rarely strikes out. They're just, there aren't a lot of Nico Hoerners in the game anymore. And then I mentioned earlier, you factor in the Gold Glove caliber defense. And I would say it's easy to present him as, or label him as one of the more underrated players going in baseball. So what have you thought of his season so far, Jason? And the bat that is, now near the top of the order on a lot of nights. And we know all about the Gold Glove caliber defense from Nico Hoerner as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk batting title, I believe Trey Turner is out right now. He's hurt. So his batting average is going to kind of sit at 305. But just looking at Nico Hoerner, on September 9th, he had a 291 batting average, and now he's at a 299. Like, that's doable. Like, you got to get hot for the next 12 games, for most of them. But it's for his caliber. Yeah, I mean, he could add another 8-9 points on batting average between now and the 12 games. I mean, he added 8 points in the last 4 games. So I think, batting title's on the table. Unlikely, in the sense that you're chasing, and anytime you're chasing, it's unlikely. Especially when it's not like Trey Turner can have a bad game tomorrow, because he's not playing.
Yeah.
With that said, his season's been awesome. And I think, one of the things I was looking at when we were doing a prep for this was his StatCast page, and his StatCast page is just one of my absolute favorites this year. I love weird StatCast pages. A couple years ago, it was Brenton Doyle was my guy, because he all of his offensive stats were 10th percentile or below, but then you had his base running and his defense, which were 99, right? So I love weird StatCast pages. Austin Hedges is another guy, catcher for the Guardians, is another guy like that. But Nico's is weird in a different way. And it's weird because his expected batting average is 96th percentile. His squared up percentage is 96th percentile. His whiff percentile is 99th. His K percentile is 100. His range is 98th percentile. And his sprint speed is 81st percentile. At the same time, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories, 24th percentile or below. including 1, 2, 3, 4 of those categories in the bottom 10 percentile. So it's just he's like a ridiculously extreme this year. He is so good at making contact, but he doesn't really hit the ball very hard. But it's just it's created the 19th highest F-WAR hitter in baseball. Like he's been very, very, very good. And no, you probably don't really want more than like one Nico Hoerner in your lineup, but having one Nico Hoerner in your lineup is really useful. He's been, I think, one of the more underrated players. I remember being bummed out on him on draft night. I didn't really love the pick. Super wrong on that one. Happy to be wrong on that one. But I think he's a really good case for the unexciting early round pick when we talk about like the major league draft. I mean, when you really like looked at his profile, yeah, he looked all right. He had good bat to ball contact skills. The power was suggested to be a little bit better than it's turned out to be. The glove has been better than it suggested to turn out to be as well. But he kind of always felt like an unsexy pick on draft night. Like it wasn't like it's somebody that I think you would get very excited about. And then you look and all he's doing is like real close to a 5-win season, and he's one of the best second basemen in baseball. He's 28, so it's not like this is going to stop anytime soon, or like in terms of like we kind of expect it to stop. Now, do I think he's going to have a 5-win season? No, but he's like you can basically pencil him in for 3.5 wins every year. And so on draft night when we see these picks who are quote unquote safe prep college bats instead of like the prep arm who could turn into whatever. I think Nico Hoerner is kind of the argument for why you take those kind of more safe guys, because even safe guys can turn out to be one of the best players in baseball. And that's what Nico Hoerner's been. He's been a top 20 position player this year. He's been awesome. He's been lots of fun, really lots of fun. And he's been so consistent in a lineup that felt like it's had two halves of it, like a real dominant part and like a less than dominant part. Nico Hoerner's just been good all season. I think like if you just pull up his splits, he's the incredibly rare consistent hitter. I think we always dream of like the consistent hitter. Like even the best hitters aren't consistent. There are the guys who are in the MVP conversation have had bad months, but if you look at Nico Hoerner, his lowest WRC plus on the season is a 99. And up until September and October, the highest his month was a 110. So he was just kind of like the same dude. Now he's gone absolutely ballistic in September and October right now, but yeah, his consistency, his glove, he's just been a really good player. And yeah, this is the year of Nico Hoerner. I think you could make an argument he's been the MVP of the team.
Yeah, there just aren't a lot of you bring up a bunch of interesting points there, Jason. There aren't a lot of like peaks and valleys in his game. Like you're not going to see like a 3-week stretch where it's like, oh my gosh, Nico Hoerner striking out a ton. He can't hit the ball because he's in the 100th percentile in strikeout percentage. And I think if you brought up that word consistency. I think if in today's game, if you're looking for the model of consistency, you need someone who doesn't swing and miss a lot, because Nico Hoerner can flare one into right field on a bloop shot for a single where it's like 50 miles an hour exit velo, but because he always makes contact, there's always a chance that it's going to find some grass in the outfield, or he's going to hit one with eyes on it to the left side of the infield. And he's just been very, very fun to watch. I would go as far as to say this too, Jason. I am not saying I am necessarily in this camp, but if someone wanted to make the case to me that in a big spot this postseason, because the Cubs are going to the playoffs. If someone wanted to make the case to me, Jason, that with runners in scoring position in a big spot, that they would want Nico Hoerner at the dish for this lineup, because you at least know the ball's getting put in play, I would at least hear out that point that person is trying to make. Because this is a different example, but it ties in. I was flipping around games last night on Monday night, and I saw that because I was sitting around. There was nothing else to do. Monday Night Football was on, but I was watching baseball on my laptop, just kind of bopping around. When it gets to this time of the year, I can watch games or any games that matter for like division races, wild card races. So I was watching Tampa Bay and Toronto, Jason, last night. and Toronto was up 2-1 in the bottom of the 10th inning. It had gone to extra innings. So Toronto has a 1-run lead. Tampa Bay has runners on first and third with nobody out. And Tampa Bay goes strikeout, 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 game over. First and third, nobody out. You just get that runner in from third. At worst, it's going to the 11th inning. They go strikeout, strikeout, strikeout. And that's where I kind of tied this back to Nico Hoerner. And I was like, if someone wanted to present an argument that in a big spot, runners in scoring position in the postseason, this Cubs lineup, they would want Nico Hoerner at the plate, I would hear out that person's case because I see the validity of it because you know that ball is getting put in play in some form or fashion.
Yeah, no, he's really good like that. He's not going to hit you the 3-run home run in that scenario.
Correct.
But if you need the ball in play, he's very good at that. And he's even going to kind of stay out of he's a little bit of a double play ability to stay out of it as well with the sprint speed as well, being that he's an 81st sprint speed. He's going to hit the ball on the ground a bunch, but he's still going to be able to kind of beat those things out. And he doesn't hit the ball super hard. And when you don't hit the ball super hard, it also helps lessen double play situations, which, I think is one thing that we probably don't talk about enough. He's only hit into 4 double plays all season.
Wow.
Only 4 double plays. And this is somebody who has a ground ball percentage that is fairly high. His ground ball percentage is going to be fairly high. So he's somebody who puts the ball on the ground a bunch, 44.5% of the time. This is a very high ground ball rate, but because he's got good sprint speed and he doesn't hit the ball super hard, it does kind of limit your double play-ness. And that's something he's done a lot of his career. If you look, he did have a couple seasons, 2022, 2023 down, double digits, but he's only grounded into 12 double plays since last year combined. So I think he kind of stays out of that kind of thing, with the trope of hits the ball and play a lot. You kind of think, well, the trade-off there is that, they do hit the ball and play, but a little bit more prone to double plays. And I think he kind of has a little bit of a built-in value against that, because hard hit balls and slow speed is how you kind of add into that. And he kind of does the opposite. He doesn't hit the ball very hard and he's pretty quick. So yeah, I think if you were in a spot and you said, hey, I need to get this run home from third base, Nico Hoerner is maybe the best on the team that you can guarantee it. Maybe Kyle Tucker is the other one.
Yeah.
And, I think Kyle Tucker, I'd probably actually put Tucker above just because he hits more fly balls, kind of guarantees that run home from third without kind of worrying about like, oh, is he going to be able to beat out the play? Is it going to, be hit directly back at the pitcher type of a thing? But outside of like Tucker, I think, you'd probably say Nico Hoerner is probably the guy that you want to see up in a spot with somebody on that you need run, maybe more than anybody else on the team.
I just randomly thought of this. You brought up his sprint speed a couple of times. I don't even know where I would start to look because I don't remember what account sent it out. There was a game quite a few weeks ago, and I don't remember if it was Matt Shaw was at the plate, Nico Hoerner was on base, or if it was just a side-by-side from the same game. And I don't know if you saw this at all. So it was a side-by-side, and it showed Nico Hoerner running the bases like second to third, rounding third, and he's literally like this, like how you teach it kind of. He's like tight, compact running. And then they showed Matt Shaw, and he's like rounding second, and his arms are flailing, and I can't remember where I saw it, but it definitely was a tweet that went around in the couple of Cubs group chats I'm in, and we all thought it was hilarious because you have Nico, who model of consistency. Looks like this, buttoned up guy who's just doing it by the book, and he's running like this. And then Matt Shaw was flailing his arms around trying to get to third base. And it was just pretty funny. It was just a side note because you brought up his.
It's funny you mentioned that.
There's no way
I just pulled it up. Yep, I literally just pulled it up. And funny thing, it was by Brendan Miller. And
did I describe it accurately? Like
yes,
Nico's like this, right? Because it was a few weeks ago, and I didn't want to embellish.
Yeah,
Nico's like this, and Matt Shaw's like
August 19th, 2025, tweet by Brendan Miller. And I follow Brendan. So long story short, but I've worked with Brendan in the past. I started with him on Cubs related way back in 2016, and I know him from the Pro Sports Daily days that I've been on. So yeah, I know the guy who tweeted that. he's somebody that I know. I've done podcasting before with him. I've written articles with him, so I know Brendan.
How great is that clip?
Yeah, it's a great clip, and I mean it nails it. They have completely different running forms as Nico Hoerner looks perfect and Matt Shaw looks like he is about to fall over.
A cartoon character,
Yeah,
like running.
yeah, it's funny. It's funny that Brendan did that one because I know him.
That is awesome. That's crazy that you found that right away.
Yeah,
Northside Baseball Podcast. He is Jason Ross. I am Mitch Woodmeyer, talking anything and everything Chicago Cubs baseball. Next topic. I think it's an interesting one, worth talking about. Again, we know the topics beforehand. I send them over to you, but we do not discuss, because I think that makes for a better podcast. So I don't know what you're going to say. You don't know what I'm going to say, what opinion I have, what side I'm going to take, so on and so forth. And the topic I wanted to talk about, because, like, again, the Cubs are going to the playoffs. There's not going to be some collapse, some disaster scenario where they don't make the postseason. Now, it is almost in all certainty going to be as a wild card team, unless the Brewers have some absolute collapse that is unforeseen, right? But the question is, who should the Cubs' number 2 starter in the postseason be? Because I think most would say Shota Imanaga will be starter game 1 for the Chicago Cubs wild card round. As for the number 2, you know what? I'll say my answer, and then I'll give my reasoning why afterwards, because I want to defer to you on this one. But mine is Cade Horton. I want Cade Horton as the game 2 starter, but I'll let you say yours and then your reasoning as to why.
2 reasons. One, it breaks up the lefties. If you're going to play a 3-game set,
wait, yours is Cade Horton too?
Yeah, Cade Horton.
Okay,
yeah, Cade Horton's the answer. Cade Horton's the answer for me. He breaks up the lefties a little bit. So you've got Shota, you've got Boyd. If you can win it in 2, that means that you can start the next series with Boyd the lefty, or Tyon the righty if you want to go that way. Tyon's pitched pretty well lately, so gives you a little bit of opportunity. But Cade Horton's been great lately. He's just been really, really good. I know the strikeouts were kind of down in his last start against Atlanta. I do kind of wonder if part of the mentality that he's going through, and I don't necessarily think that the team has just like specifically told him this, but save pitches, be economical, throw pitches in the strike zone has kind of led to maybe a couple less swings and misses than we're always used to with, or at least we've been used to for the last little bit. But I think he looks super composed. I think he gives you a different look. The data on Cade Horton has just been, I mean, as good as it gets. Dating back to his last 36.1 innings, you're talking a 1.24 ERA, a 3.77 xFIP. You're talking a strikeout percentage that is 25.9, a walk percentage of 5%. He throws a lot of strikes. He gets the defense involved. He gets a lot of pitches on the ground. So he would be the guy that I would go to second. I do think that of all of the right-handed pitchers on the team, he's the one that I would trust the most for 5 innings, 6 innings, however many innings you're going to get. And I think once you get in the postseason, you can use your bullpen a little bit more. You don't need to baby Cade Horton so much. It's like, hey, go out there and you give me the 5 best innings you can give me. Like, you just go get them for 5 innings. You give me the 5 best, and then I can shorten the game up after that. And that's kind of like, Matt had just written an article about, the Craig Counsell way of winning. And it's kind of that slow anaconda chokehold where we get up early and then we choke you with the bullpen. And with guys like Kittredge and Porter Hodge, who's looked really good, and Palencia, who seems like he's going to be back. And we're going to talk about Mike Soroka here in a little bit as well. You got a lot of righties who you can go eat innings with. You got guys like Pomeranz, who's been fine. Caleb Theobar, who's been great. So you go with lefties. I mean, you got enough guys to where if you can just get Cade Horton to give you 5 really, 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 really good innings, I think that's your best bet for a number 2. So I don't know why you're feeling Cade on the number 2, but that's where I'm sitting on him.
Pretty similar. Literally the number 1 bullet point I had was you go with Shota game 1, a lefty, and then Cade Horton, a righty, in game 2, and you split that up because you got to remember wild card round. It is best of 3. Like, it could be over in 2 games. And so you go with the lefty to me and then offset that with the righty. And then if you need Matthew Boyd, the lefty, back for a potential game 3, or he is your game 1 starter if you were to advance. So I like the split up of the lefty to the righty in a shorter, more condensed series like that, in a best of 3 in the wild card round. And then I wanted to preface by saying, like, Matthew Boyd has been phenomenal this year. He has been absolutely phenomenal. He's been as healthy as he's been in years. Hasn't made this many starts in a season, Jason. I'm sure you're well aware, since 2019. Started 32 games in 2019. He started 29 so far this year. I'm guessing he has probably 2 more left on the books. But it's Cade Horton for me as well. And a lot of the dialogue sort of swirling around Cade Horton is he going to win the Rookie of the Year? He's the odds-on favorite to win the National League Rookie of the Year. I kind of zoomed the microscope out a little bit, and I believe we're seeing one of the best pitchers in baseball in the second half since the All-Star break. Like, Cade Horton has been that good. He hasn't allowed more than 2 runs in any start since July 9th. And the one start since July 9th that he did allow exactly 2 runs came in Coors Field against Colorado. Outside of that, every single start has been 1 run or no runs allowed. Like, he has been absolutely dynamic. I like where his chase numbers are at. Love that he isn't having major issues in the walk department. And then, like you said, you split up the lefty with Shota game 1 to where Boyd's at, or excuse me, where Cade Horton would be at in game 2. But it's not a discredit to Matthew Boyd in the season he has had. But you look at some of the, like, he's had some hiccups recently. Like, I'm not saying Matthew Boyd is trending in the wrong direction, but Cade Horton is clearly ascending. And it feels like, you mentioned the strikeouts, maybe not where you'd want him to be in the last start, but he still finds a way to just go out and throw up zeros. Like, Cade Horton is clearly ascending, where Matthew Boyd has kind of just been pretty consistent and now a little bit rocky in maybe 3-4 recent starts in the last month and a half. And it doesn't mean that will continue, because Matthew Boyd's had an incredible year. But I would give the ball to Cade Horton game 2. The Cubs have been limiting his pitch counts, kind of how deep he goes into a game in the second half. Part of that, wear and tear of a guy who maybe hasn't logged this many innings. Part of it also is the belief, at least that I have, that the Cubs probably want him primed and ready to go for a spot like this in a game 2 of a wild card round. And I don't think, and I'll get your thoughts on this too, I certainly don't think if you give the ball to Cade Horton in a game 2 that it's like, oh, they're giving it to the rookie, the sexy name, the sexy option over Boyd. Like, I think Cade Horton's earned it. I think Cade Horton has earned the right to start a game 2.
He's got a 0.84 ERA since the All-Star break. And we can talk all about, what ERA really means and how, that's just that's a number that you can't continue. Like, at some point that number is just not going to continue. Like, that's just impossible. He's not the world's greatest pitcher who's ever lived. So, like, we know that can't keep. What we also know behind that, though, is if we look at the regular numbers, they're all really good. He is limiting hard contact at a ridiculously good rate. He hits the shadows of the zone. He's not leaving pitches over the zone. So part of this is earned. I don't want to say he's a sub-1 ERA guy, because he's not. Nobody is. There's not. If Pedro Martinez at his best career season wasn't a sub-1 ERA guy, nobody is. But is he a pitcher that you could, like, really trust right now? Absolutely. The stuff is there. The learning is there. The advancement is there. His ability to use what's called seam shifted wake, or using spin against hitters is amazing. The amount of specific spin he uses. So the way that he creates spin versus the way that a hitter observes the spin is amazing. And I think that's really one of the things that you can't really prepare for. You go up there and you hit, and a hitter is going to see that spin of a baseball. You can see it in my rec league. And it's just these guys aren't as good, but I'm also not as good. So when we're talking about major league hitters, they can see the spin, but if you can make the spin look one way, but the ball go another, and you can look at Cade Horton's observed movement versus the spin that he actually puts on the baseball, it's shocking. The baseball can basically move in any of the directions. So, it can come from 12 o'clock, it can come from 3 o'clock, it can come from 6. And as a hitter, when you have to defend against all of those kinds of movements, even though the spin keeps looking the same, it makes it very difficult to hit. And it's already very difficult to hit. These guys are throwing 96, 97 miles an hour, and the amount of brain time that you can have, the reaction time to be able to swing and hit these things, if it's moving the way you expect it, is really hard. But once it doesn't, it becomes nearly impossible. And that's what Cade Horton's able to do. He's able to use, he's able to basically break the what we know of like physics and movement in new ways. So he's great. He should pitch. I don't care if they're playing the Padres, the Mets, the Dodgers. You put Cade Horton out there because I think he's earned it. I think he's right now the guy who I would trust the second most behind anybody. And yeah, you tell him, you look at him and you say, hey kid, give me the 5 best innings you got. And we'll go from there. So yeah, put Cade Horton in there.
Let's pivot from one pitcher to another, although different roles. At least that would be the expectation based on what we saw Monday and the chit chatter. Moving ahead, it's Michael Soroka, who the Cubs acquired at the deadline. Curious your thoughts on what his value potentially could be in a postseason series if he's on the roster. He followed up 6 scoreless from Jamison Tyone on Monday with 2 scoreless of his own. Wasn't flawless by any stretch of the imagination. First game back, though. Since suffering the injury, he walked 2, but no runs allowed. The velocity on his fastball was back up, which that's what I was kind of looking for, I guess, Jason, because I think, wasn't it his last couple of starts before the trade and then his only one with the Cubs before leaving early with an injury? The fastball velo was down to around like 92, 93. It was back up 95, 96 in
Even
his
lower than that.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
It was like sitting at like 90 a couple of those games.
Yeah, it was back up in his relief appearance on Monday. As far as his value in a postseason series goes, my opinion is if there is some, it comes to the bullpen 100%. I don't think there's any talk about him being a starter for the Cubs, unless for some reason they would go with like an opener and he could give you 2 innings, but I don't think that's going to be in the cards either. And then if you want to stretch it out and talk about, well, if he's on the roster, he's in the bullpen for the postseason, what kind of spots do you put him in terms of like, do you put him in a high leverage spot, a tie game in the 7th inning or a 1-run game late in a contest of a postseason game? I'll defer to you on that one and kind of see what you think. I do think it's good that it's not this isn't like uncharted territory that he's kind of sifting through. He pitched out of the bullpen for the White Sox last year and did fine, did pretty well in that role. So it's not like, like some guys, they'll get moved around in sports and it'll be like a culture shock going from one franchise to another, or changing positions can be a culture shock. And he's pitched out of the bullpen before. So this isn't like a guy who has started his entire career and now the Cubs are bringing back from injury and like, nope, we just need you to, max it out for 2 innings out of the bullpen. Like, he's done this before. So I think that kind of bodes well for his chances as far as comfortability maybe that the Cubs would have bringing him out of the bullpen in a postseason scenario.
I would even raise you from he pitched better than fine last year to the bullpen. He pitched amazing.
Yeah.
Ridiculously. We're talking a 2.75 FIP. He had a 39K percentage. And we're talking, this is not in necessarily a small sample size. This is over 36 innings. He had a 2.75 ERA. He had a 2.75 FIP. He had a 3.26 xFIP. He struck out a ton of guys. And, you could see it in his appearance, last night. I know it wasn't perfect. We had a couple walks in there, little rusty. Slurve was hit or miss in terms of hitting the zone, but fastball sat, max velocity was just under 97, sat average 95. If you told me that you had a right-handed pitcher coming out of the bullpen who could throw the slidery curve slurve thing that he throws on top of the fastball sitting at 95 and could touch 97, that's a weapon against right-handed pitching and right-handed hitting. And if you're going to go and you're going to say 2 of your 3 best starters are left-handed, right? 2 or 3 best starters are left-handed. You got Shota, you got Boyd. You are going to need right-handed relievers to come in and deal with that lineup at some point. Teams are going to stock up against righties against you. So once you get past the 5th inning, or you even go 4 innings. Sometimes these, we don't need to worry about getting like guys wins or whatever. Need to go 5 innings. Mike Soroka can throw 2 innings in the playoffs, no problem. So you get yourself a guy who can come in after a lefty and give you 2 good innings, 5th and 6th inning against a lineup that has heavy right-handed hitters, and you get somebody who can attack right-handed hitters with that mix. And if you look at the mix he threw last night, almost entirely fastball slurve. almost entirely fastball slurve on StatCast. So I think that is not only a very useful reliever, I think that's going to be a very good reliever. It lets you use Andrew Kittredge, who kind of has a similar like slider fastball combo. Kittredge is more of a kind of a tight slider, and his slider's amazing. Kittredge is just unbelievable. And just to kind of throw this out there, I actually wouldn't be surprised if they pick up his option at like $8 million at this point. Like I think he might be a useful guy. But you're allowed to, that way you can use Kittredge in that 7th, 8th, and 9th inning, but you can use Soroka in that 5th and 6th space. So kind of get like Andrew Kittredge light out of that. So yeah, I think his value is huge. I think it's immense to be able to throw somebody that you can trust maybe in that spice. It's good to get him back when you do. He can get a couple of innings in here. He can maybe throw, maybe another 8 innings before the playoffs. You get him in. You find 6, 7, 8 innings in the next couple of weeks. Let him settle into a decent bullpen space, and then in the bullpen in the playoffs, I say when you need somebody in that like 5th to 7th inning range, you don't want to go with Kittredge in that moment. You want to save him for a little bit later. That's prime Mike Soroka time.
It does seem the timing worked out pretty well given the circumstances, assuming they aren't rushing him back. And by all accounts, that's not happening at all because you do get some time for him to sort of adjust now. You're going to be in the bullpen, get him out there for a couple innings here and there before the regular season ends. They're just tune-ups for him. And maybe the Cubs think differently if they're like 1 game behind Milwaukee right now. But again, all the odds are pointing towards the Cubs being a wild card team, probably the top wild card team in the National League. And so I think the timing and the circumstance works out pretty well to give Soroka some of these tune-up opportunities before you do kind of toss him into a postseason situation where the lights are enormously brighter. Northside Baseball Podcast, Jason Ross is he. I am Mitch Widmeyer, talking anything and everything Chicago Cubs baseball. Sad to say this part. This is the final rendition of the minor league report. I know it's going to be short this week. But this is the final rendition of it. You have taught all of us a ton throughout the season, brought up names that as soon as we finish recording, some that I am not familiar with that I immediately go and look up. And I know this will be the last one for this season. So as always, Jason, the floor is yours.
I'm going to do this a little bit different today. With it being the last one, instead of going like the kind of width, I'm going to go breadth on basically one guy. I want to spend some time talking Jackson Wiggins today. And the reason I want to talk Jackson Wiggins is because since he's in AAA, we have AAA data. And once we have AAA data, that means StatCast. Major League Baseball does have StatCast in all of the minor league stadiums. So major league teams have access to that stuff. Sadly, in terms of the public sector where I live, I only get data from AAA and one single high A league in which the Cubs have no affiliates. So doesn't help me. So when you have somebody like Jackson Wiggins, who spent most of his season with like South Bend and Knoxville, I have the Fangraphs stat page. I can look at his strikeout numbers. I can look at his ERA. I can look at his xFIP. What I don't get is I don't get things like barrel rate. I don't get things like his stuff plus. I don't get his movement profile. Now we're going to talk 5 innings here. The under 6 innings. We're talking small sample sizes. So understand that the data that we're talking here is subject to change. With that said, getting data lets us kind of peek behind, the Jackson Wiggins, who he is, what he's looking like. So I think the most important data that we can talk about today is his movement of his pitches. If you're not super familiar with it, there is a statistic that Fangraphs has, and we call it Stuff Plus. Stuff Plus is designed to talk about how a pitch moves, like its shape. How much does it ride? How much does it run? Movement is huge. The shape of a pitch matters a lot. Now, there are ways that you can mitigate poor shape movement, and there are ways that you can have great movement and other things not matter. If you have great movement, but if you don't do a bunch of other things well, doesn't really matter. With Jackson Wiggins, we kind of want to talk about his Stuff Plus. Now, I'm using an app made by TJ Nestico, TJ Stats online on Twitter. If you do not follow TJ Stats, I highly recommend it. He posts so much free stuff out there in terms of like data. If you're a data dork, TJ Stats, couldn't give him the biggest shout out. If you got $10, sub to his Patreon. I do. It's best $10 to spend every month. And if you're not a big data guy, he's still super, super worthwhile, I think. But looking at him, he's able to kind of aggregate his stuff plus. So 100 is like league average. Above that is when you start to get really good. And when we look at Jackson Wiggins, he has a 116 stuff plus rating on his fastball right now, which is like really, really, really good. If you want to think like Daniel Palencia right now, somebody who I think we all agree pretty good fastball. He's gonna run it up there at nearly 100 miles an hour, 101 miles an hour as a relief pitcher. So if we look at his stuff plus, it is a 111. Jackson Wiggins is a 116. That is 5% better than Daniel Palencia. His average fastball has been sitting at 99 miles an hour. It has run up to 101 miles an hour since being in AAA. Daniel Palencia's average fastball velocity is 99.6 miles an hour. Essentially, what Jackson Wiggins is doing in his fastball in Iowa is what Daniel Palencia does in one inning. Jackson Wiggins does it in multiple innings. That should, first off, kind of tell you what kind of a pitcher we have here. Now, he's throwing 2 to 3 innings in Iowa right now. We can maybe assume at 5 to 6 innings, he might not be doing this as well. But I've watched his starts when he was earlier in the season, and he was carrying 98 to 99 miles an hour into the 5th and the 6th inning and the 70, 80 pitches mark. I'm actually kind of confident that these numbers aren't that far off of what you would see in a 5-6 inning pitch for Jackson Wiggins. So that's awesome. The fastball is unbelievable. However, his cutter also runs at a 112 stuff plus rating. That means it's 12% better than the average cutter. And if we look at major league pitching cutters, just like league wide, his cutter is kind of unicorny in how much it does not drop. It has incredible ride. So his cutter has amazing ride. It does not drop. It stays on plane, which is nasty when you talk about his fastball. So when it doesn't drop, it's going to sit on that same plane as his fastball, but then it's going to move. And he's throwing it at 92 miles an hour. Again, we are talking about small sample sizes. So when we talk about his cutter, he's thrown his cutter 6 times. He's thrown a cutter 6 times. I'm not, I take it back. Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. He's thrown his cutter 12 times. Looked at the wrong one. But he's only thrown his cutter 12 times. So we're talking about a 12 pitch sample size. That could change over the time. But the movement and the shape that he's getting on that cutter right now tells you that is going to be a nasty pitch. It's essentially like a really hard slider in many ways. There's a lot of velocity right there. In fact, if we look at all 4 of his pitches, his fastball, his cutter, his changeup, and his curveball, all are currently grading out over 100. And you don't see that a lot often. Usually you'll see, 1 or 2 pitches over 100, couple pitches a little bit below that. But that's suggesting that all 4 of those pitches are kind of like in that plus range. That's a 4-pitch mix. And that is such a good sign because his fastball we knew was elite, but seeing the shape grades that he's getting out of his breaking pitches, his curveball, his cutter, his changeup, off speed and everything like that, it lets you know what we have right now. And I think that's my big takeaway is finally getting into the data of Jackson Wiggins kind of reinforces what we're seeing. This is not just somebody who was throwing 98 miles an hour at Knoxville and blowing guys away or at South Bend at the beginning of the season. This is somebody who has, frankly, kind of elite shapes on his curve, on his cutter and his fastball right now. They are those kind of like ridiculously good pitches, and that gives you a really, really strong foundation. Where we go from here, we want to make sure that we're seeing a lot of strikes. He does have a tendency to kind of lose that every once in a while. Even dating back to his time in Arkansas, kind of command in the zone was kind of questionable for him. So we want to make sure that we're seeing that a little bit as we go through. He has walked a couple guys since he got into Iowa. Part of that, I think, is rust. He did take a bunch of time off. But digging into the data on Jackson Wiggins just kind of really fills me with a lot of hope, a lot of excitement for next year. We talk about the number 2 starter in this year being Cade Horton, a guy who wasn't even on the roster in April. And I think, Jackson Wiggins kind of has a profile that we could be having this conversation with about next year. And we got to see a little bit more in Iowa from Jackson Wiggins to like really feel great about this data. Again, we're talking under 6 innings, so this data is very subject to change. But it's our first peek behind the curtains that we haven't had. And there are players who can throw up really good numbers. Connor Noland is somebody who's had a pretty good season in Iowa, but the second you go on his Statcast page and you start to look at like pitch shapes and all those, it kind of paints a picture of, I don't really know how much I should trust this guy at a major league level. So while he's pitching really well in AAA, I don't think that the stuff is really there to say anything more than like an organizational up-down guy, a guy who comes up, gets a start, you throw him back in Iowa out of emergency type of a thing. Whereas when you start to look at Jackson Wiggins' page, you see a lot of really, really good things. And I'm going to follow that. He should have one more start. Iowa still is playing. They're the only affiliate who's going to have some games this week. Everybody else is done. And then we'll have the Arizona Fall League, which we don't get a lot of data from. We do get stats. And although, kind of the bummer on the Fall League is always that the pitching isn't particularly good. And the hitting is kind of more advanced. So we've seen guys like Matt Mervis have a really big Arizona Fall League and then not be able to follow that up at the major league level just because, he kind of feasted on some mediocre pitching that got sent there. Teams are not going to get their pitchers hurt in Arizona in October. They're just not going to do that. That's why Jackson Wiggins isn't going to Arizona. He's great, but we see a lot of top 100 hitters. Kevin McGonigal, maybe the best hitting prospect in all of baseball. He's gone absolutely banana town for Detroit this year. He's going to play down there, but you look at the top 100 list, there's no pitchers. Nobody's going to send their arm down there and get hurt. So, outside of that, Jackson Wiggins got one start. I'm going to be paying attention to that data. The data really should give us a little bit more information, but the initial data on him is really exciting. So, with the end of the season, I wanted to do kind of a special on Jackson Wiggins tonight. That data is just so darn good off that little bit, and getting the pitch shape is really important. So that fills me with a lot of hope, a lot of excitement into next year. If I was a prospect evaluator and I started to look at this data, I think Wiggins is a bang on top 50 prospect in baseball right now. I think there is ceiling there to be very, very good, frontline type of a starter. He's got to make sure that command is really there. That's going to kind of be the deciding factor between everything. But looking at that fastball shape, looking at that cutter shape, looking at the changeup shape, looking at the curveball shape, those are all really good early signs that this guy is not just a reliever. He's got a mix. He can go in there and throw. It's not going to be a situation where Ben Brown is throwing 2 pitches. This is a guy who's got multiple tricks in his bag. I think closer to Cade Horton than Ben Brown right now. I like Ben Brown still. I think once Ben Brown can kind of get in his head, maybe kind of a little bit more in zone command, he's going to be really good. But I think Wiggins is a little bit closer to where Horton was when we're going to see him. So, we'll probably see him sometime early next season, as long as the arm stays healthy. I wouldn't be surprised to see him by mid-May next year, kind of like Cade Horton. First injury down, that'd be the guy that I'd like to go to at this point, if he can keep it up. But yeah, that data looks really good on Jackson.
Certainly an exciting prospect. So much so that I know I had posed the question to you a couple weeks ago and just asking, is there a chance that the Cubs could sneak Jackson Wiggins into their bullpen for the postseason? And like bringing up the question wasn't even a crazy idea. Like there were other Cubs content creator circles that were bringing it up too. Like he's been that good, that electric, that good of a prospect that, he's never touched foot on the rubber in the major leagues, but you bring up the idea of, hey, could they add him to the bullpen? Because he's just been that dynamic.
You do, and you're seeing major league teams do this more often with pitchers. Hitters need more time. But pitchers, because they're the aggressor in the plate appearance. If you've got the stuff, bring them up, right?
Yeah.
And with Jackson Wiggins, again, we're talking very, very limited data, so these percentile rankings don't really matter much to me. But when you look at the Statcast page, in his 6 innings, AAA hitters can't touch him. They can't do anything with him. He is really, really, really limiting the type of contact the guys are getting in those 6 innings. And again, this data is not complete. This is too small of a sample size to make a conclusion off of any of that. It's 6 innings. It's essentially one start. But when you look at that and you start to say, you go, man, AAA hitters are struggling with this guy. They're struggling with this guy right now. And, we'll see where that goes, but the shapes, the way that they're struggling, it does. Yeah, he's got the stuff right now to be a part of a major league bullpen if you really, really needed him to be. I always said, I think it was a bad situation if the Cubs were in a place where he was pitching in a playoff game in an important position. I will continue to say that. There's too many bad things that would have to happen for that situation to occur. But what he's doing would make that not insane. And that says everything about Jackson Wiggins that you need to. I think the stuff is that impressive, and the upside is that cool on him. I'm a big fan.
Wanted to finish up just kind of bopping around a little bit, looking at playoff races that are coming down to the wire. If you look at division races, Jason, I guess we could start with the ones that feel like they're wrapped up, but who knows? The Blue Jays lead the Yankees by 5, Red Sox by 6 entering play on Tuesday. Blue Jays have a 97.3% chance to win the division. If you want to find a way to play devil's advocate with these, we can. Again, the Blue Jays, lead the Yankees by 5. If someone wanted to make a case for the Yankees, they have the weakest remaining strength of schedule in all of baseball. They have 2 left with the Twins, who are a mess, 3 with the White Sox, 7 with the Baltimore Orioles. So if you want to make a case that you think the Yankees, 5 games back with 12 to go, could catch Toronto, obviously it would take a lot, 5 back with 12 to go, but they do have the weakest remaining schedule in baseball, while Toronto has 3 with Boston, 3 with Kansas City, and 6 with Tampa Bay left. But again, the American League East looks like it'll be Toronto. Detroit 6.5 up on Cleveland in the American League Central. Phillies have clinched the National League East, and we mentioned the Brewers are 5 games up on the Cubs. If you wanted to play devil's advocate there, don't know where you would really look. Like, they have similar opponents left. The Cubs have 4 left with Cincinnati. Milwaukee has 3 left, and both teams have 3 left with St. Louis as well. It would just take a pretty big Milwaukee collapse. The 2 that we can zone in on, and again, we'll just touch on these briefly because obviously it's a Cubs podcast, but it's postseason time just about, so it's fun to look at it. And one that will affect the Cubs is, or could, National League West. The Dodgers lead the Padres by 2 games, and right now it's kind of shaping up, Jason, like the Cubs are going to be in that 4-5 matchup. And so it's looking like the 1-2 seed will be Milwaukee and Philly, and it could flip. Like, the Phillies have been red hot. I'm looking right now. Phillies are 90-61, Brewers are 91-59, but those will be the top 2 seeds in all likelihood the National League. But why it matters who wins the NL West for the Cubs is whoever doesn't goes from the 3 seed to either that 4 or 5 spot and likely plays the Cubs. And right now the Dodgers have a 2-game lead over the Padres. How do you really see that one shaken out? I think it's easy to just kind of say Dodgers will hang on to it. I'm looking at strength of schedule. Both teams, Dodgers have a pretty difficult road left. They have 2 against the Phillies, 4 against the Giants, 3 against the Diamondbacks, 3 against the Mariners, who are fighting for the AL West. Padres, they have 3 against the White Sox, which a little more lenient, but then they play Diamondbacks, Mets, Brewers. But that NL West race, if you're a Cubs fan, one you certainly want to track because whoever loses the division likely will face the Cubs in the wild card round.
They will. I saw a good point somebody made that they're rooting for the Brewers right now. And actually, you know what? After seeing it, so am I. I don't want the Brewers to lose another game the rest of the year. And I know that kind of hurts us as Cubs fans, but if you want to talk like easiest path through the playoffs, right? The Brewers getting the 1 seed is good for the Cubs because I would rather face the Brewers than the Phillies. I would rather face
after the wild card round. You're talking
after the wild card round, right?
Because there's no reseeding.
No reseeding.
Most are probably aware of that. So Cubs are pretty locked into that 4 or 5 spot.
Yeah,
like it'd be shocking if they won the division. It'd be shocking if they fell to that.
They're actually kind of locked in that 4 spot. Pretty
correct.
Much,
yeah,
it would have to take a lot,
which means they would host the best of 3, the wild card
Mhm.
round. Even if it goes to a game 3, all 3 would be at
Yep,
Wrigley.
all 3
And
at
then if
Wrigley.
you win that, again, there's no reseeding. So the
Yeah,
4
so
versus
you
5 winner would play the 1 seed,
1
which
seed.
now is Milwaukee.
Yeah, and I would much rather face Milwaukee right now. This is no shame to the Brewers, but I think all the things that they do in the regular season that's great is kind of one of the things that they don't do great in the playoffs right now. If you're looking at a lineup that you feel like you could that's not going to score like 10 runs on you at any given time, it's not going to blow up one of your pitchers, and the Brewers, and it's not to say that the Brewers aren't a great team. The Brewers have done some really great things. But they had that magic run, and I think outside of the magic run, they're just a good team, right? They're a good baseball team. Um, I think they would be the kind of the team that I would like to see. The Dodgers and you let the Dodgers and the Phillies go beat each other up. If the Dodgers, that's kind of what that at that point, that's what you'd almost be hoping at, that one of the Dodgers and the Phillies kind of beats each other up, and then you can kind of see them in the championship game. So my guess is, and I mean, listen, the Dodgers are starting to get a little bit healthy right now. They're probably not going to stay healthy. That's the Dodgers have built a team. They built a really deep team that had a lot of injury concerns, and when you do that, the bad part about that is some of those guys get hurt, and a lot of those guys have been hurt. And I think I wouldn't trust any of them to fully stay healthy. With that said, they do have a couple games up. I think they'll probably end up taking the division. I can't bet against them. I just think top to bottom, when they're right, they're the best. They're the most talented roster in baseball. It's very top heavy though. It's very top heavy. But I would rather. I think they'll probably get there. The Padres just have not been playing particularly well. I said it last week. I'll say it this week. And again, no negative towards the Padres, but I think the Padres and the Cubs match up pretty well. I also want to avoid the Phillies because they do have the lefties at the top of their rotation, and I saw some data today. Since July 1st, the Cubs have actually hit lefties better than they hit righties, which I know it doesn't feel that way, but I think I probably still like to avoid their kind of couple of the lefties that they have at the top of their rotation. It's a good top of the rotation. It's a really good top of the rotation, so you can avoid it. Maybe you're doing well. One of the races that I'm really interested though in is in the AL West. The AL West
Yes,
is
I was
kind of
gonna
one of
bring up
those
that,
that was the one thing that I'm really interested in. And I say that I always kind of have a little bit of a rooting interest in Cleveland. My father is a Cleveland fan, so I kind of keep an eye on the Guardians and everything like that. And they've kind of put themselves in a place where they could make the playoffs, and a lot of that deals with what's going on in the West, with the Mariners, with the Astros, and the Rangers, and I think that's such a quagmire right there, because you have the Mariners who feel like they're kind of slipping a little bit on it, and they've missed the playoffs in so many times. I think like the
in
last time,
many in like gut wrenching fashion
gut
down to the
wrenching ways.
final few days of
Yeah,
the regular
I
season,
do.
final day.
And
Yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong, I think the last time they made the playoffs was 2020. It's been a while.
I can look it up quick.
I got to check that. But it's the the last playoff
2022.
2022 was the last
Yeah.
time. Yeah, they did. I forgot they made it in 2022. Before then, it was like their big season that they set the record. Was the last time with wins where they won 116
Yeah,
games.
2022. That is crazy. 2022. Sorry to cut you off. They
Yeah.
made the playoffs. Before that, it was 2001.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, they have not made the playoffs very often. So I've got a friend of mine who's a Mariners fan, so I'll root for them to make the playoffs if they can do it. And then you've got the Astros sitting right there, and I don't really care about the Astros much myself, one way or the other. I know a
Yeah,
lot of people hate them for the cheating thing. They're pretty indifferent for me, but that's such a close matchup, and the Rangers are still kind of like
they're
hanging
hanging in.
on. They're
Yeah,
hanging
just to
on
give the
in there.
numbers too. Entering play Tuesday, AL West that Jason's referring to, the Mariners are a half game up on Houston, 3.5 up on the
Yep.
Rangers. And then just to tie in the AL wild card, right now, if the playoffs started, it'd be Yankees versus Red Sox wild card round, 4 versus 5, which would be electric. That'd be cinema. But that last wild card spot is currently held by the Astros. And they're 3 games up on both Cleveland and Texas. So within striking distance for the Guardians and the Rangers to potentially catch Houston or Seattle, who's ever kind of fallen into that last spot. But the AL West is tight. Half game lead is as slim as it can be, and then 3.5 up on the Rangers, who have caught fire in the last few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Rangers have kind of
Yeah.
come alive. And then did you have anything else on the American League you wanted to touch on?
No, I think the rest of the American League seems pretty settled.
Yeah.
I mean, the 5 games, kind of like where the Cubs are at, where it's 5 games. It's not impossible numbers. It's really one good week in one direction and one bad week in the other. Any team could go 1-5, 2-4 in a week, and the other team goes 6-0, and all of a sudden this thing, any of these divisions close up. But outside of like kind of those kind of like one team catching fire and the other team really falling off, it feels like most of these are pretty settled right now.
Yep.
Which is an interesting kind of outcome of the playoff expansion. You think like playoff expansion, you're gonna have more spots, more teams battling, and this year it's just kind of like, I don't know, like maybe one of these teams can sneak in. Maybe somebody can find their way into it. The Mets have kind of allowed other teams to
That
be
was the
involved.
last one I wanted to touch on. Let's go to that. Go ahead. The NL wild
Yeah.
card. I'll just lay it out and then you jump into it. The Mets hold the last wild card spot in the National League right now. 1.5 up on Arizona, 2 up on Cincinnati and San Francisco. It is the Mets 2-8 in their last 10. Before that, it feels like probably 2-8 in the 10 before that. Like they've been in a bit of a tailspin, bit of a nosedive for the Mets, and it is certainly within the realm of possibilities that Arizona, Cincinnati, or San Francisco could leapfrog the Mets. The Mets have 12 games left, like most teams do, and they have 3 against the Cubs left and 3 against the Padres. So it's not even like the easiest schedule left for the Mets. So how do you see that potential last spot playing out? Because again, you've got not one, but you've got 3 teams within striking distance, all within 2 games of the Mets for that last wild card spot.
It's going to be wild. Anytime a team just kind of like, especially the Mets. I follow a couple people who are clearly Mets fans. On my Blue Sky, Jarrett Seidler over at Baseball America is one of them. Big Mets fan, and it's been fascinating to watch kind of Mets social media kind of like burned down too. We get so kind of like caught up, I think, in Cubs world that we forget that other teams melt down. I mean, in similar fashions. And, the Mets are in kind of a weird situation where, Steve Cohen spent a lot of money. They've got a lot of these big contracts out there, and they have a lot of decisions to make at the end of the season. What are they going to do about Pete Alonso? Brandon Nomo has been terrible. What do they do about that contract? Where do they go with some of these decisions? Like, how do they add? They've got some young pitchers. They're basically brought up all their young pitchers. They brought up Jonah Tong, who's a highly regarded pitcher. They brought up Brandon Sproat, who's another one of their young pitchers. They're basically throwing everything at the wall, trying to make the playoffs here. We talk about the Cubs starting a rookie, Cade Horton, number 2 in the playoffs, but he's been absolutely crushing it in terms of like major league ability. He's got over 100 innings of major league kind of quality under his belt. Brandon Sproat and Jonah Tong are like legit rookies. Like, these guys have never pitched at the major league level. They've never seen these guys, and the Mets are basically saying, listen, we're in free fall. You two need to go out there and really kind of help us make the playoffs. And that's a lot right now on their shoulders. And I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how the Mets go with that. Which is, Jonah Tong and Brandon, they're great. They're great prospects. They're really cool. Jonah Tong is kind of like, if you don't know much about the Mets system, he's Tim Lincecum in very much the same way. He has that same ridiculously over the top kind of throwing motion. He's a wild man on the mound with that. He's got a lot of movement. But there's big stuff there, and it creates extra movement coming that far over the top. But seeing how those guys kind of handle this position is going to be really important, because if the Mets don't make the playoffs, what do they do in the offseason to offset that? So I think the Mets, are a great story to pay attention to with the young players that they're basically turning the keys over to in these moments, on top of the like fallout that could happen if it doesn't go well. Like, what does the Mets offseason look like if they just bought, Juan Soto last year? And he's been fantastic. I know there was a lot of talk about Juan Soto early in the season. He's been phenomenal. the legitimate chance at a 40-40 season for the guy, which is unbelievable. I didn't think we would ever talk about Juan Soto in that way, but he's been that good. But outside of him, like that's a weird team right now in terms of like where they go in the future. So yeah, I'm watching the Mets a lot. I think the Mets are kind of like the Mets are the team to watch. I think if you're not going to be paying attention to Cubs baseball, I'm going to tune in on a lot of Mets stuff.
Mets 22-31 since the All-Star break, one of the worst
Yeah.
records in baseball. So as for the Cubs, Cade Horton versus Paul Skeens on a Tuesday night. Again, by the time you listen to this, that game will have already been played. I saw the over-under was at 6.5, which is, for those that don't know much about sports betting, 6.5 is about as low as the odds makers will go. Once in a great while in a postseason game, you'll see an over-under at 6. That's for postseason. Very, 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 very rarely will you ever see a 6.5 over-under for total runs scored in a regular season MLB game. But when you have Cade Horton on one end, Paul Skeens on the other, that's what the odds makers have it at. Cubs currently in that first wild card spot, 4 up on the Padres. They've got the Pirates and then the Reds for 4 this week. He is Jason Ross. I'm Mitch Woodmeyer. This has been the Northside Baseball Podcast. We'll see you next week.